What's going on, guys? This is the 5 Year Pass podcast with me, Suddy, and this is Shyam bringing you what is our third competition, Shyam, third season, including the Euros of football coverage. So we thought we'd start off the season a couple of weeks before, as most channels do, and we thought we'd take it a bit different. We're gonna preview some of the key teams, I guess, this season. Mainly the top eight from last year, and including Brentford, because we thought it was a good opportunity to kind of see what Brentford's all about. But basically, yeah, we're gonna go through each team and see what the chances are, see some key players, and see kind of what the expectations are. So, should we start?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So we thought, beginning with the kind of the the best of the rest, we're going to start with them. We're going to start away with Everton, who a very mixed season and ended off very sourly, and things just have seemed to gone from really sour to bad to worse. Before you get into your little bits, I know you've looked into it quite deeply, but obviously with Ancelotti, who's one of the best in the world, has left him to go to Madrid, which just feels like a spit in the face. And then not only that, an ex-Madrid Liverpool manager coming back to Merseyside, the form Benitez taking them aboard, and then on top of that, Gylfi Sigurdsson, which reports haven't confirmed it yet completely, but Gylfi Sigurdsson being arrested for what we think is allegedly child assault of some sort. Not a good look, man. I mean, talk us through those things, and then talk us through Everton as a whole. What do you see for them this year?
Yeah, I mean, last season they're a bit up and down, weren't they? They threatened to challenge quite a bit, and they ended up 10th, so I guess right in the middle of the table. But they did have a negative goal difference. Scoring goals was a big problem for them all season, and it was interesting for a couple of reasons because they only conceded, I think it was 48 goals, which is quite good when you look at the teams around them. It's good as anybody else going around, but they did have a lot of trouble scoring goals. They only scored 47, which was about equal with Southampton, who was in 15th place. And when you consider they had, an England level striker in Calvert-Lewin, that's a very low number.
Mm.
And like you said, they did peter out a bit last season. Depth was definitely an issue with them. Last season, in a sense, was a one-off because there were a lot of games every 3 days, and they won't have to deal with that so much. But definitely, depth was tested and will be tested again this season. But
Yeah.
it's an odd season if you look at last season historically, because they did have 59 points, and
Mhm.
59 points is historically a lot better than 10th.
Mhm.
So it's interesting in a sense that they're mid-table, but they got, which is probably about where they should have been, but at the same time
Mhm.
threatened to do a lot. Historically, got a lot of points for a 10th place team, but you almost suspect, like you were sort of alluding to, that their ability to push on this season is going to be tested a lot more than some of the other teams.
Yeah, I think Bill Kenwright will feel very bitter. He has a very good social standing in football. Bill Kenwright, he was the guys against I think he was the head of the kind of unofficial figure against the Super League, if I recall. But
Mm.
he'd be left sour with having to get Benitez, who is a good manager. He's going to feel the brunt of it. I mean, there's already graffiti and banners outside Goodison Park against that. Just before we get to ins and outs, Sham, do you think Ancelotti earned the Madrid job through that Everton? Did he really earn it,
No,
or do you think it was a
I
safe
don't think
job?
he did. I think he did well with what he had.
Yeah.
But in terms of being able to go to Real Madrid, traditionally, and not that this has ever really happened, but you would expect someone of like a Jurgen Klopp type level to be going
Yeah.
to a club like Madrid.
Yeah.
Um, that he's not achieved that with Everton, but he's obviously got the history behind him. I tend to
Mm-hmm.
think that it's more the fact that he's a bit of a manager who will play the card he's been dealt. Real
Mm.
Madrid kind of need that at the moment. He'll work
Mm-hmm.
with what he has, and he can get the best out of individual players. He's not a
Yeah.
systems guy; he's a players guy. So I think that suits the Real Madrid model, where players tend to be stars as opposed to playing with a philosophy. And obviously, with the restrictions, they're going to be quite restricted in terms of who they can bring in because of all this wage cap movement in Spain. Barcelona's been very heavily affected, but I would be stunned if they were the only club affected. It's just that they're quite public about it. I think Real
Yeah.
Madrid quietly is suffering almost as much as Barcelona. They
All right.
should be making a bid for someone like Mbappe, but they're not, and I think that's because of a cash flow issue.
Yeah. Oh, let's just get to ins and outs, man. So Everton have done a little bit of movement on the transfer window, not a whole lot. The couple of people returning, and obviously we have we said the Gylfi Sigurdsson option. So let's talk us through that.
Well, the big in I wanted to talk about was Benitez. He's a massive in for Everton. I know that you've mentioned a couple of times about some of the negative press that he's getting. I'd actually be interested in knowing how much negative, because is it the majority of Everton supporters? Is it a silent majority, or is it a loud minority doing these sort of things? Because he did make a few comments that he probably shouldn't have made, and with hindsight would not have made. But he is a big
Mm-hmm.
Liverpool man, and when I say Liverpool, I mean the town of Liverpool.
Mm.
And the thing is, there for what, 6, 7 seasons, and he did quite well at Liverpool. He
His,
overachieved with a squad and sort of put them together and won the Champions League in his first season.
his wife
Um,
and kids still live there as well.
yeah, they've been
They've
based
always
out of
lived
there
there.
ever
Yeah,
since
yeah.
he was there. The fact that he's a Liverpool legend and said some negative things about Everton, which, to be honest, like if you're Manchester City manager or you're Manchester United manager, you're going to say negative things about the other club, right? I mean,
You almost have to. You
that's just
almost have
part of
to.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be surprised. I'm interested in seeing whether it's, like I said, a small group of people making a lot of noise, or if it is the consensus among Everton fans. I tend to
Yeah.
think, even given the fact he's a Liverpool icon, he's kind of the best that they could have done in that circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think he's a good manager and a good fit for the team.
Mm-hmm.
However, if they start slowly, it's all going to come down on him. This is something
Mm-hmm.
that could potentially end very quickly if he doesn't get off to a good start. So how
Mm-hmm.
Benitez starts the season is going to be very important, because he could shut everybody up very quickly, or he could, have something drag out and have sort of the Benitez out after about
Mm-hmm.
3 games.
Yeah. A key in player would be Moise Kean coming back from loan. Could he go back out on loan, or do you think do you think he's a Benitez type player?
He did well on loan. And
Mm.
I tend
He
to
did at
think that
PSG,
if
yeah.
you've got one guy scoring a lot of goals, which is Calvert-Lewin,
Mm-hmm.
I think they do need more depth up front. So they have
Mm-hmm.
Keane and Tosun, both strikers, have come back. I think they'll keep one of them and send the other one out. Probably Cenk Tosun,
Mm-hmm.
probably be sent out. Um, they did go get some width. They got Demarai Gray and Townsend, which is good because they only really had one winger. They tended to play Richarlison and Rodriguez in wider positions.
Mm-hmm.
Benitez does like a bit of width in his teams. He always played Dirk Kuyt at Liverpool, sort of as a right
Mm-hmm.
winger, more than as a striker.
Mm-hmm.
He had quite
Mm-hmm.
specific plans. Those might change a bit, but his wingers tended to run at the corner flags as opposed to at goals, and you might see those sort of players being put in those types of positions, particularly on the right
Mm-hmm.
side. I think you go for width on the right side and play Rodriguez and Richarlison a bit more off the left. And that's assuming that Richarlison doesn't go to Madrid, because there's noise now that Ancelotti's trying to get Richarlison over to Madrid, which seems a bit much. He's a good player. I don't know if he's Real Madrid level, but he's a good player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the last thing, and I don't want to harp on this more anymore, but Sigurdsson is a huge loss for them. He's a talisman. He's a Bruno-esque, level for Everton. And if he doesn't play this season, I mean, look, I hope what they're saying isn't true. I don't want to get into the politics and that kind of thing, but I hope what they're saying isn't true. I hope he does come back to play. But just in and of itself, how big of a loss is Gylfi Sigurdsson?
Yeah, well, when they beat Liverpool, they got him to take the penalty. That penalty that got them ahead 2-1. So if you
Yeah.
want an idea of how important a player he is, then that's probably it. He did actually have 6 goals and 5 assists last season. He didn't have very good player rating. It's probably about
Mm-hmm.
6.7, but he does produce a lot of end product. And
Mm-hmm.
he only had 24 starts as well. He came a bit off the bench. I think that was more to do with the formations, because Ancelotti did change a lot from 4-3-3 to 4-2-3-1, and
Mm-hmm.
he is a bit of more of a 10 than anything else. So I think just his
Mm-hmm.
ability to produce end product is something that, and particularly in a team that's struggling to score. I
Mm-hmm.
like Alan in the center of midfield, but he's a defensive midfielder. So that ability, I
Mm-hmm.
think that comes on to Rodriguez to take that number 10 mantle and really push
Mm-hmm.
forward. And it's important for Rodriguez to step up this season. In regards to the Chargers, the one thing I said to you when it came out is they wouldn't push something like this if it wasn't true. You don't put someone up in
Mm-hmm.
headlines like that.
Mm-hmm.
That is up in headlines, and a celebrity person, unless you're pretty sure that it's the case. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
quite just.
Unfortunately.
I don't know. I'm gutted to hear that this sort of thing happens. It's always a shock.
Yeah. Just last couple of points here. For me, Everton very much finish where they were meant to finish last season, maybe a position above, maybe a position below. That whole kind of bunch, the teams we're talking about these next few videos, in Everton, Leeds, Villa, but but I guess they're starting off. They start off their first 6 fixtures as we've written here: Leeds, Villa, Brighton, Burnley, Southampton, Norwich. Kind fixtures, and if you've seen with Villa, you saw with United last year, winning that first 10 to 12. Sorry, not winning, but doing well in that first 15 fixtures bodes well because you can taper off at the end of the season. I mean, it's obvious math. You can taper off and not have to worry. You have to start well. And who are the key players for you? I guess you mentioned many players, but who would be key? Assuming everything stays as it is now.
They've got a great opportunity, like you said. The first 3 home games are Burnley, Southampton, and Norwich. So you'd want to get 9 points from that, and then obviously Leeds and Villa are away, and Brighton as well, who I think will do very well this year. So there's an opportunity there for them to do one. I think they need to, given the negativity around the club. Otherwise, it could just all seep in, and they could have a bit of a Wolves type season if they're not careful. I think key players in terms of scoring goals, Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin are key for them. I think that Pickford is key as well. I think he had not a good season, but he had a very good Euros. Pickford.
Very good Euros, yeah.
Yeah, and
I wonder if you could bring that up.
Two goals the entire tournament he conceded. One was a free kick, and one was a scrappy 6-yard box type of goal. He looked more calm as well. He looked very twitchy. Like when he injured Van Dijk, he was just nervous as anything. It just ran through Van Dijk out of not out of animosity, but just because he couldn't control himself. Yeah. So he's, I think, quite important. And with Sigurdsson, I don't think Sigurdsson will play for Everton again. I think Rodriguez was actually their top-rated player on WhoScored.com. I think he needs to move into the 10. He was brought to the club to be a talisman, and I think he's going to be given that opportunity. So I think he becomes key as well. Sorry.
Yeah. And prediction for this season?
I think it's going to be a bit like that. I think of those sort of top 11 teams, there's about a 10-point gap between Villa in 11th and Newcastle in 12th. I actually think they might fall down and join those teams in that sort of 12th to 13th months as opposed to move up, which is strange with a team that's got 2 England internationals. But one thing worth noting is when teams go and play those types of tournaments, the teams get knocked out in the group stage, the players tend to come back and it doesn't affect them. Teams that go quite far in domestic tournaments, quarters, semis, finals, those players take a bit longer to recover. So they've got those two of their most important players in Pickford and Calvert-Lewin might not quite be there to start the season. And if they don't start well, I think it's going to be a heavy season for Everton. And I do think that of the top sort of 11, they're the most likely to sort of move down the table.
I'm actually thinking they're going to be relegated this season, man. I think they're going to struggle to stay up. And it's a big statement because I don't think Benitez is a crisis management guy. He's a guy when he's left his own devices. Liverpool will be a great example. Inter Milan's a great example. Newcastle left his own devices at the start. Towards the end, Mike Ashley came down on him, and he kind of just crumbles, or his teams crumble. Maybe he transmits that to the team. I don't know. But I don't see, if he stays for a good chunk of the season, it's not looking good for Everton, in my opinion. There's just a cloud over them right now.
Yeah, and that's why the start's the key. If they can get some momentum, I think they can turn it into something good. I just don't quite see it. And it might find a situation where they get someone like an Allardyce in at the end of the season to start playing long balls at Calvert-Lewin ahead of goals, and that sort of thing. Duncan Ferguson in the 1990s, that and Kevin Campbell, that sort of thing. So, I'm not going to go with relegation, but I think what Wolves did last season, I see Everton sort of about that level.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so you heard it here first. Everton not to do particularly well. I'm saying Everton could be relegated next season, but I tell you what, there's some good players, good manager. And an upswing of fortunes would be, I think in both our opinions, exceeding all expectations. If they would have finished anything above 10th, I think that's fair to say. Would be given the situation, all factors staying the same. Yeah. Anyway, perfect, Shyam. So that's our Everton preview, guys. Thanks so much for watching. We've got many more videos coming up with basically the top 8 teams from last season. There's going to be Villa and Leeds in our next 2 preview videos for the season. Any closing thoughts, Shyam?
No, I think like I said, it's going to be tough because I think a lot of those teams are moving up. I think that Everton is going to be hard pressed to keep up with them.
Yeah. All right, perfect. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We are the 5-Year Pass Podcast. My name is Suddy. This is Shyam. Keep football simple, and as always,
keep passing, guys. Cheers.